All right, we are back to talk about another Mervyn Peake book, this time Gormenghast, the second but titular book in the Gormenghast trilogy. And this is exciting. If you haven't watched or read the discussion we had about the first book, Titus Grown, I don't know what you're doing here, but get on out. But, Marianne, if you want to introduce yourself again.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marianne. I've been on BookTube for a couple of years now. But yeah, I mainly, initially I was mainly into classics. Now I've been branching out, doing some fantasy. And Evie was the one who so generously introduced me to Gormenghast. And it's probably, I know we still have yet to read the third book, but it's probably one of my favorite fantasy series so far.
Yeah, I can safely say, like, unless something like horribly goes wrong with the last book, like, this is a great series. Like, his writing alone cements it for me. But yeah, I will leave a link down below to Marianne's channel, as well as to the discussion that we had regarding the first book. Yeah, and to avoid technical difficulties like we did last time, we're just gonna go audio only. So there you go. So you just finished it yesterday, right?
Yeah, last night. I finished it last night.
Nice. How did you like it?
Okay.
I know that's a
are we gonna have like are we gonna do like non-spoiler and then spoiler?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, let's we're just going full spoiler. Like, no, don't hold anything back.
Okay, first things first. Steerpike is dead. So my favorite character is just now gone. So already going into Titus alone, I'll be like, oh, okay. So he's gone now, so yeah, we'll just have to see. But yeah, I don't know. I suppose it was, I guess, a fitting ending to Steerpike. I just kind of wish like we had, I don't know, several more books in between before we got there. That's the thing about Gormenghast. I feel like I would have loved to have like more books in this series.
Oh, yeah.
Normally I like trilogies and quartets, but I don't know, with this series, I was like, I would like more. I would like more machinations and plotting and all of that. So yeah,
and just the world itself. It's just it's so rich for the telling.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was heartbreaking a bit when he died. I don't know. He's a despicable character. I cannot defend his actions, but he was just so interesting. And you were following him from Titus Grown all the way here, and yeah, I'm gonna miss him. I'm really gonna miss him.
He's definitely a compelling character.
Yeah.
I actually have all my notes because I was writing, I was taking notes as I was reading, just my like reactions and stuff like that. And my first note that I wrote was, "No chapter titles makes me sad."
Yeah,
but the chapters are much shorter this time, so
I did find it odd that in Titus Grown that we had chapter headings, we had like chapter titles, but then this one, it's like, no, it's just chapter 1, chapter 2. There was like one chapter heading with Irma, and then like none whatsoever.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I just found it weird. Yeah, I just found it weird.
But it was still very like the forward momentum was there, so I could forgive it. So it felt less. If you hear my dog barking, I apologize, but it felt less episodic than it did, or like vignettes is what I think you described it as. It felt less like that from the first book and more like of a
linear. It felt more linear to me.
Yeah, there we go. That's the word I'm looking for. But but his writing style is consistent, and it's just I ate it all up. So good.
It's still amazing, and less episodic, less like vignettes, and we did get similar to I think Titus Grown, where we had like the Kita portion that was happening along with like Steer Pike and the rest of the Grown family. Here in Gormenghast, I think the newest perspectives that we got to see were the professors. I feel like they were the main new characters and perspectives, other than Titus. So
yeah.
What
The professors, the professors, and oh gosh, what do they call her? The
Thing.
The Thing, yes. Which is, I mean, you are introduced to her at the end of the last book, but still, she gets her own perspective. I just the headmaster just dying and just being like stick straight up in the floor when the kids are like doing their game, and he trips over like a little piece of wood that wasn't put back correctly, and he just dies. It just, I'm like, what is
That was
happening?
hilarious.
This is amazing.
It was so hilarious in the most morbid way. And then as soon as it happens, his little assistant, I think, doesn't he just like throw himself out of the window or something? Like he just ends himself?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Oh my
like,
god. And then Belgrove wakes up, thinks that the headmaster is doing a headstand, and just starts clapping because he has no idea what's going on.
But nothing could have happened without that one scene. Like, I don't know, I feel like, well, I guess it could have happened, but like Irma could have gotten married, but like Belgrove being in the position that he's in and then getting married to Irma, like, I don't know, I feel like he wouldn't have been in that position and to do that without the headmaster died in this weird death.
You have a lot of important events that rely upon like these insignificant, significant little events that kind of just thrown at your way.
Right.
And what did you think of Belgrove, like, as a character?
So I'm trying to recall if this is the scene that I had marked. It's when Titus is talking to, I think it was Belgrove. Or maybe it was he's like talking about how he doesn't want to like he wants to, they're talking about learning, and he's talking about marbles and stuff like that, and they're playing marbles or something like that. And just the Belgrove is, it's interesting. Like he was in the midst of all his professors before, and now that he's like the headmaster, he like, I don't know, it's not a case of like he doesn't want to be superior, but like now that he has what he wants, he doesn't want the responsibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like overall, like initially when I read him, he kind of came off as like pathetic in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, he's this old headmaster, he's this old teacher, and I don't know, I think he has this idea that because he's old, because he's been a professor for so long, he ought to be, he ought to be headmaster, he ought to have this power, he ought to have these type of things. But what he really wants deep down is sort of different. It's much more simple than that. I really like that scene where he's playing marbles with Titus. Like he shows up trying to be like, because he's the headmaster, and I have to, I should reprimand you and all that. And it just, once he finds out that Titus likes marbles, like he likes marbles, then they just start playing that game. And like it feels like almost he's pretending, like he's trying to pretend to be this knowledgeable, wise, old person, but deep down, he's a much more simpler man. But he feels like he ought to be reaching for these heights that he puts himself on. I don't know.
Right.
That's the way he came off to me.
I really liked that scene because it shows how it shows both Belgrove and Titus, where Titus, he's constantly pushing back against, like, he doesn't want to be in the ritual. He wants to be free. He doesn't want to be, you know, he doesn't want to be the Lord of Gormenghast, and he doesn't want to be
Mm-hmm.
above all this stuff. He's like, I just want to be free. And you have these two characters that are kind of, I guess you could argue, in a similar path.
I can see it. I can see it.
And they're just like, just the dichotomy of like a very young boy. He's like, Titus is what, 7 or 8, and then
Yeah.
Belgrove is, old man. It's I just love it. And then the I don't know if your edition had the little illustration, but in the edition that I have, there is an illustration of Titus, that scene of Belgrove talking to Titus, and it's just,
Oh, hold on.
it's
Is it this one?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the same one.
yeah,
Yeah, I get that too.
yeah. And it's just so good. I know I'm not being very eloquent. I'm just like, this is so good, but it's really really hard for me to describe like why I love things about books so much, or particular books, other than it's so good. I loved this part.
Yeah, and I mean, you're dealing with a rich story like Gormenghast. It's kind of it's a bit more difficult, at least for me, to properly convey exactly what appeals to me. But yeah, I really enjoy that scene where it's like Belgrove, Titus, and then Dr. Prunesqualler shows up, and they just start playing marbles, and you can hear them laughing and playing around. It's very innocent. I think it's a very innocent scene.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's a great point. Because everything after that, it just gets darker and weirder and more destructive. Because you get
Yeah.
Nanny Slag dying. I never thought I would have cried over a character in this series, but I cried over Nanny's death. Um, and you get a
I,
lot
it,
more.
it
Sorry, go ahead.
it's just so sudden. Yeah, it's just so sudden. I didn't expect her to just go. And then
Yes.
reading Fuchsia's reaction to her, because this is like the one person that Fuchsia sort of has, like, at the time, the most affection for, because like this is the woman that kind of just raised her. And that
Right.
feeling, yeah, she's describing that she's looking at her body and she feels nothing. And she has to ask the doctor, am I wicked? Is there something wrong with me? And it's just,
Right. Yeah, I actually I marked that passage, and here she lay. It was as though the doll-sized body had been thrown aside as too old and decrepit to be of any further use. Fuchsia, directly as she had been told, rushed to the small room that she knew so well. But the doll on the bed was no longer her nurse. It was not Nanny Slag, that little motionless bundle. It was something else. Fuchsia closed her eyes, and the poignantly familiar image of her old nurse, who had been the nearest thing to a mother that Fuchsia had ever known, swam through her mind in a gush of memory. It was in her to turn again to the bed and to take the beloved relic in her arms and in a passion of love. But she could not. She could not. And she did not cry. Something, for all the vividness of her memory, had gone dead in her. She stared again at the shell of all that had nursed her, adored her, smacked her, and maddened her. In her ears the peevish voice kept crying, "Oh, my weak heart, how could they? How could they? Anyone who would think I didn't know my place." And then she talks to, asks Dr. Pruneswaller, "Am I wicked, Dr. Prune? I don't understand. I don't feel anything." And I'm just like, like, for the um melodrama, bombastic melodrama. I don't know how you describe it, but just the the grandness of it all, that particular scene was just so realistic. It really brought you
Yeah,
down to
yeah.
a sense of reality.
Yes, because there are, people who might have that reaction when dealing with,
Exactly.
yeah, with a loved one who's lost. And it's I think I think it hits more knowing that it's Fuchsia who's thinking this, because I feel that out of all the, people of the grown house, so Fuchsia tends to be the most emotional. It's like deeply hidden, but there's like a huge well of emotion that's within her. And the fact that it kind of just goes dry or runs out when seeing her dead nanny is just, I don't know, it's I think it hits harder in a way.
It
Because who
does,
would mourn her better?
yeah, and I think it's also representative, a really great scene to show the growth of Fuchsia. Like, I loved reading Fuchsia's arc throughout this book. It
Mm-hmm.
was
Yeah.
beautiful. Like, she became such a strong character, and she didn't put up with Steerpike's bullcrap. And I don't know, just seeing her deal with everything in the midst of so much loneliness. Like, she's still alone. And then
Yeah, yeah.
finally losing Nanny, like, she's even more alone. Titus is always out doing, crazy stuff. And I love Fuchsia's character.
Yeah.
Um,
It did get, especially towards the end, it did really get sad when where she basically kind of slowly becomes overwhelmed by
right.
like this melancholy, like this depression, because so many things are just happening one after another. Like she's slowly losing her brother, Flay dies, Steerpike gets revealed to be a murderer. The one guy who she, had romantic inclinations turned out to be a murderer, and it was just too much. It was just
Yeah,
absolutely too
and
much. And
oh
yeah,
god,
go go go.
I was just gonna say, when she, I mean, I know we're skipping all over the place, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, when she's contemplating suicide, like, I'm
Oh
like,
God,
oh
yeah.
no, and then she slips and falls. I kept thinking, I don't know, maybe something will happen, and then they find her body. I'm just like, no,
That
no,
that entire scene where she's just like standing in front of
of
the
the
window.
window.
Honestly, yeah, it's as morbid as it is. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the book, and
Same.
it's really sad. I mean, like there's a portion of it where it basically says that she assesses herself, and she pretty much says that aside from rank, she was basically a failure in every other aspect of her life. It's just so sad. And the fact that while she was looking at the window, she's reminded of the time that Steer Pike showed up, at her window, gave her the rosebud. Like she had that fleeting memory, as if like she thought for a moment, like in the past, she could have been, I don't know, she could have been like one of those young women who had like a fairy tale romance, who had a chance for all of that. And
Right.
I find it very poignant that at the end, uh, she begins to sort of act like the way that we are first introduced to her in Titus Grown, where she's imagining. She's imagining, like she's in the world of her imagination as she's standing on that windowsill. Like she returns to the days when she was 15 years old, when she was still that emotional, moody young girl that life had, been over the
Right.
years.
Yeah. I did like that they got to reconnect with Flay, in a meaningful way. Like,
Yeah, they had, yeah.
reading them getting him back into, like, the castle. Like, what was it, for probably at least for half of the book, if not, at least a third of the book. The whole the whole storm that's happening and the flood, like, that could have gone, it could have lasted for far too long, but I was so compelled by everything that was happening with the flood. But before we get to that, because I feel like that's like
Yeah.
that's the pinnacle. I mean, it is truly the pinnacle, but or the high point of the book. But Steerpike, to switch it to Steerpike, what did you think about him and the twins, keeping them all locked up?
Okay,
Making you think that they're like, there's like a, what was it, plague or whatever?
yeah, it's like, once again, I can't defend the guy because he pretty much just, again, honestly, realistically, logically, he ought to have just killed them right away. In all
Yeah.
honesty, if he wanted to be safe, he didn't want any loose ends. He could have just ended them, and that'd be that. His secret would have been safe. But he keeps them alive, uh, you know, uh, for his pleasure, basically. So he has some form of control over them. And that end of the chapter where they're sitting in the darkness and they're basically, like they view Steerpike as their god, but they start contemplating, what, we could kill him. And I'm like, oh boy. Like, it was such a
And
good
the whole
introduction
they
to
set
more
the booby
intrigue.
trap or whatever, like,
Yeah, the booby trap. Oh my gosh.
oh,
Yeah, but I think the twins are another example of an area where Steerpike really let his guard down.
yeah,
He really let his guard down at that point. Because what's it like, after the uh, they attempted to kill him, like he stayed away for a while, and then because he got burnt, he couldn't go back to them. Like, they died at that point already.
right.
But I feel, yeah, but then it's because he wanted to visit their corpses to make sure that they're dead. He was ultimately caught in a way. So I think it's very interesting that while the sisters were sort of like a stepladder to him gaining power, they were also conversely
Demise.
a means, yeah, to his demise.
Yeah. The Peake's descriptions of the twins' corpses, and I'm like, this is so,
It's morbid. It's scary.
it's it is like, it is the, again, I'm so surprised that these descriptions are in a book from the night, what was it, when was this originally published? 1950.
1950s. Yeah,
1950. Yep, 1950. And I'm like, what? What is
yeah.
happening?
That, honestly, that scene. I think I also, as morbid as it is, I found it very interesting because it also gave us an insight on sort of Steerpike's his mental state at that point. Like, it's described that he starts strutting around their corpses like a cock, and then
Oh, yes.
and then what's it called? He grabs, I think, a wooden stick or something. Like, he takes a bit off of it and starts running the wood over like their ribs, like in like a xylophone, like the sounds it makes from a xylophone. And it's like, it's just, you can clearly tell that this is a guy who, he's very different. He's a different guy, because I feel like Steerpike in the years before would not indulge in this, and he knows he wouldn't indulge in this. But I feel like ever since that, the fire with Barkentine, like, his mind is kind of like, he's snapped a bit. He's
Yeah, that was actually
yeah.
another part that I marked, is like, Steerpike was aware directly he had entered the terrible room that he was behaving strangely. He could have stopped himself at any moment, but to have stopped himself would have been to have stopped a valve, to have bottled up something that would have clamored for release. For Steerpike was anything but inhibited. His control that had so seldom broken had never frustrated him. In one way, that this new expression had need of an outlet, he gave himself up to whatever his blood dictated. He was watching himself, but only so that he should miss nothing. He was the vehicle through which the gods were working, the dim primordial gods of power and blood. And it's like this. it's like them dying is a physical representation of not only just his brain breaking, because he's literally having an out of body experience at this moment, but
Mm-hmm.
his power is broken as well. Like he has no
Yeah.
means to have that step up anymore.
Yeah, it's like it's quickly crumbling. Like he's so reptilian, he's so analytical, but as as you get to the latter half of Gormenghast, you you see him sort of scrambling.
Yeah,
He's scrambling now. He's not in complete control. Like he's like for instance when he was trying to woo Fuchsia, it wasn't working. Like it wasn't going as planned, and I feel like he was kind of working at the seat of his pants at that point. And
yeah,
then yeah, so he's slipping. He's slipping.
yeah.
So it's very
And
interesting to follow.
and partially because Fuchsia's seeing through his bullcrap, because she's having this character arc and character growth and stuff like that. Yeah, in that scene, that was the scene where Mr. Flay is killed as well, right?
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah. He gets a
He
knife to the heart.
yeah, he redeems himself. Like his loyalty to Gormenghast is not explored, but exemplified yet again, even though he's been away for so long. Um and I think that was them burying him in the, what was it,
It, I forgot the
uh
name, but it's
the
like where the
graveyard.
loyal.
Yeah, graveyard of the elect retainers, a small
Yeah,
space
yeah.
of metal covered ground. Had Mr. Flay been able to foresee his funeral, he would have appreciated the honor of joining so small and loyal a company of the dead, and if he had known that the Countess herself, in draperies as black and as intense as the plumage of her own ravens, was to be there at the graveside, then his wounds would indeed have been healed. And that was such a beautiful passage.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then him, like, Flay being, I think it was Flay, right? Was the one that was um
The
hearing the
sisters.
twins as they were dying. Like,
Yeah,
and he thought they were
yeah,
like ghosts, and he's like, what's going on? It's
yeah.
just
That
it's
was,
so it's like a poetic justice thing happening for Steerpike, losing his power, for Mr. Flay getting his honors and dues as being loyal to Gormenghast. And I mean, unfortunately, obviously, to the demise of the twins, but I think it was just a really cool scene for those two characters.
what else? Um, what did you think of Gertrude, the Countess, in this book?
So I she's another one where I really enjoyed, like, she was developing her she was getting stronger and more, like, I don't know, more assertive in everything. But then she kind of, as soon as she finds Titus and everything kind of gets to where it should be, and the flood is over and everything's back to quote unquote normal, she reverts back to herself and is less assertive and very, you know, well, the Countess. She's very Gertrudish. But for a moment she was that leader that was necessary, and her stepping up to that and moving all the furniture and all the necessary stuff up floors in the castle as the flood gets higher and higher. I just thought that was, envisioning that was just so cool. Just the entire flood was just, it blew my mind in the best way. Like, you wouldn't think that would be so compelling, but Peake made it so compelling. Everything around it, with she's having the the builders build the boats, since they can't carve anything. They're carving boats now, and they're kind of going around, and just Steerpike being on the loose and them trying to find him, and so good.
Yeah, the flood was, I didn't see it coming, honestly. And in a way, I think what's also great about Gormenghast, and I think like also Titus Go in a way, is just how I feel like the natural world is in a way kind of reflective of like the drama or like what's going on within Gormenghast. I mean, like the flood arrives. When did it arrive? It arrives after Steerpike is on the loose, basically.
Right.
So Gormenghast is in chaos, and it's in peril, and then you have this torrential flood that threatens to destroy everything. So I think it was just very fitting how the natural world kind of reflected the plot, the drama that was going on in the story. But yeah, I really, once again, when it comes to Peake, the way he describes scenes is so, for me, it was so easy to visualize everything.
Yeah.
It's like the words melt and you just see images.
As someone who doesn't visualize often or really at all, the visualization that I got, kind of broadening the definition of that term, it was more about the atmosphere, and like Peake is very effective in creating the atmosphere to immerse you in it. But that's just for me because I'm not a visual reader. So, but he was still effective in like with the atmosphere, and I got a similar, if not same, experience of just being completely immersed. Sorry, I was just trying to find the note that I had. Of course, I can't find it. I know I messaged someone about this, but the one thing that really bothered me about this book is not the thing, but I don't know how to say this. So, and it's not even that it really bothered me. It's just I'm very conflicted about it. So, Titus is idealizing the thing as this natural creature from the natural world. She's completely free. She has no one to control her, nothing, no whims to not whims, but nothing, no rituals to bind her, no duties to kind of smother her. So he's idealizing the thing, and when he finally meets her, maybe I just read it that way, but like, was there coded assault happening? Because that's how I read it. What was your interpretation of them meeting and just
Like
Titus in the
if
thing?
actual assault happened,
That's how I read it. Like,
personally, I didn't read it that way.
okay,
but I could definitely see how people can view it that way, because the way he views her, she's a freedom personified. Basically, she's basically a symbol for everything that he wanted. He wanted absolute freedom from Gormenghast, its rituals, the institution itself. He not loves her, but he desires for her because he desires greatly for that freedom. I think during that scene, like he has a lust for her. Like Peake uses that word. It's like a lust he feels. Perhaps like for her as the person, but I think lust for also what she personifies, basically. But yeah, that scene, yeah, it's weird with the thing, because like a part of me is like, should we be treating this as like she's just purely a character, or just do we treat her as a symbol, like just a metaphor? It's just, yeah. When it came to the thing, I was just iffy on a whole. honestly. But I get what Peake was sort of like was doing with that character, like what the purpose for her was with regards to Titus and his journey.
Yeah.
And then like she abruptly, I did not see that coming, by the way. I did not see her being struck by lightning and then being burnt alive like soon
Yeah.
after. I did not see that happening. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah. That's also part of my, like, I don't know, conflictedness of it is like I read this as like coded assault, because he sees her, realizes that it's less of she's less of the ideal and who she actually is. Like, she's a wild person who she has no education, no, like, she's quote unquote uncivilized. Like, she's out in the woods. She's a woodland creature, a wild thing. And he's realizing like who she actually is rather than this idealized vision of her of, oh, she's free and she doesn't have duties and, you know, she's wonderful or whatever. And then again, this is just my reading of it, like, it's just because he jumps on top of her or whatever. I'm trying to
He
find
holds
where.
her down. Like, he holds her
Yeah.
down. He jumps on her. He holds her down. I think and then she gets away. I don't know. Wait, what happened? Like, he managed to get her. He managed to get his arms around her. Fuchsia showed up, and that distracted him for a bit, for the thing to get away. And then she gets struck by lightning. Is that the event? Is that how? Am I remembering that
Yeah,
correctly?
she runs because it's during the it's when they're in the cave.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. The
she
cave during
goes
the
to the
storm.
cave and then, like, hold on. It was, but what he caught was so unsubstantial that he fell with it to the floor from the very shock of its lightness, talking about the thing. Um Titus gripped her with an angry strength, the full weight of his body lying across hers, for they had rolled over one another and he had forced her under. He could not see her face. It was closely shrouded in the wet linen, but the shape of it was there as her head tossed to and fro. It was like the head of sea-blurred marble, long drowned beneath innumerable tides, save where a ridge of cloth had stretched across the forehead and took the shape of the temples. Titus, his body and his imagination fused in a throbbing lust, gripped her even more savagely than before with his right arm, tore at the shirt with his left until her face was free. And it was so small that he began to cry. It was a robin's egg, and his whole body weakened as the first and wild virgin kiss that trembled on his lips for release died out. He laid his cheeks against hers, blah 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 blah. And it's just, he was sick with a kind of glory, and Fuchsia is aghast, and that was just my interpretation. And then the thing gets away. She stands in a puddle, gets out of the cave, stands in a huge puddle, and gets struck by lightning. Because, in case you didn't know, never stand near a body of water or in a body of water when it's lightning outside,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what happens. You will get struck by lightning.
Yeah, I don't know. It's honestly because of her abrupt death. Like, as soon as he catches her, she dies. Like, he spends like a lot of the book sort of like uh pining for her, wanting to see her, and then when he finally gets her, she slips away and then she dies. I feel like the abruptness of everything
Yeah.
just kind of reinforces, like, at least for me, like, that she's meant to be more of a symbol or a metaphor. I'm not entirely sure. Because at that point, it said that upon the thing's death, Titus was no longer a boy. He was
Yeah.
now a man. So
And
yeah, but I could easily see your interpretation because yeah.
and that's another thing, is like, oh, the whole like becoming a man thing. That's an
Yeah.
additional thing. Like, so I'm like, coded language. Um but that is the start of the huge rainstorm that becomes
Mm-hmm.
the flood.
Yep,
Um
yep.
so weird, but so cool. And just the search for Steerpike,
I
all
love.
again,
Oh my god, that was amazing.
again, the Countess kind of leading everything and like taking care of everything, making sure that things are in you know, taken upstairs as the water gets higher and higher, while also coordinating trying to find Steerpike. It's just she
She
takes this
she
power.
really.
Yeah.
Mhm. She really steps up, but then like she becomes really efficient towards the latter half of this book. But I think in a way it also highlights her deficiencies as well, because
Hmm.
it literally took a murder and a flood to get her to start, start moving. Like, I mean, like this, she's a very capable, intelligent woman. And however, she's also, she's a mother, but she's also a neglectful one. Like,
Right.
all this, like the way I see it, it's like she spent all her love and her care over the years on her cats, on her birds, showing basically nothing to her own children, to a point where both Fuchsia and Titus kind of just, they're so disconnected from her that they kind of don't feel like she's their mother anymore. So it's like,
Right.
as a mother, she hasn't really filled that department. And then, like I said, like, yeah, she really stepped up, but it only took tragedy, like the utmost tragedy, like for her to start working. And it's like, if honestly, if she got her brain to like start pumping earlier, I think she would have been able to sniff out Steerpike earlier. Like they would have
Oh
gotten
yeah.
him quicker. But
All the
because like, yeah, yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say to I mean to your point about the thing with the abruptness of the thing's death, like it's the same thing for the Countess, where as soon as the you know Steerpike's being found and him dying, and subsequently uh, resolving the tragedy of Flay's death, and him just generally Steerpike generally being a fugitive, and also the flood receding, it's an abrupt change in her. It goes back to how she was.
Yeah, she goes
um
back. She doesn't like. She doesn't really change. She's not like, oh, Titus, my son, and like she starts to, be more active. She starts to show more love and pride in her boy. She's like, nope, I'm done. The crises have been averted. I'll just go back to, how I was before. And that's it. Yeah.
and that leads to, or that lends to, just the absurdity of this series, like the whimsical absurdity of it all. Like, I don't know. I think the three words that I would use to describe this series, obviously so far with the two, is whimsical, absurd, and morbid. Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely morbid.
but
Yeah, but honestly, the way I view it, overall, all these characters, with regarding to like the Countess, especially with Fuchsia, even looking at Titus. When I read Gormenghast, once I finished it, like my view towards uh, Gormenghast, like how do you feel about the institution itself, the castle itself? Like how do you feel about it?
I I feel like it is it is a thing that has created these characters.
Hmm.
Like, in any other, I don't know, place, like these characters wouldn't have worked, like, or have been shaped the way they were without Gormenghast as a residence, as a castle. Um because again, it's whimsical, it's absurd because it's so large. And it's dark, it's gothic. At least in my mind. Um
Hmm.
which, by the way, I started watching that
The
Gormenghast
BBC. Oh,
series.
yeah.
I turned it off after like 5 minutes. I'm like, I can't.
It's
This is
different.
stupid.
It is different. I don't know because the three of you, when it comes to Gormenghast, I'm two ways about it. Like I'm enthralled by the castle itself, the architecture, just the atmosphere. But I feel that Gormenghast, the institution, it's just so. I feel that it produces people who are stunted, deficient, and misshapen in some way. Honestly,
Yep.
because I look back on like characters like Fuchsia and Titus, like characters who like innately had this desire to sort of break free, to have some, I don't know, to find some bit of happiness. I feel that even if there was no steer pike, if there were no, this person to kind of kick off all these events, I feel like these wouldn't have been happy, uh, sufficient people, happy,
Right.
well-adjusted people. Like Gormenghast doesn't produce these type of individuals.
Right.
It
Yeah.
just does.
For as wide, like as huge as this castle is, it's very stifling.
Yeah.
For individuals. Even like Fuchsia, Titus, the Countess, Lord Gormenghast, even Mr. Flay. Like, I think the only reason that Mr. Flay was able to survive as long as he did is because he had his duty to Gormenghast.
Yeah.
And he's able to survive outside in the wilderness because of his duty to Gormenghast. Which the end of the book sees Titus leaving. So I wonder.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. I'm so curious how this is gonna turn out. Which
I
I
thought it
know
was great.
technically it's technically the series is unfinished, but I am very excited to see what is gonna happen with Titus leaving.
I
Leaving the
was
castle.
rooting for him.
Yep.
Because another character I think we didn't talk that much about was Barkentine. And I feel what's interesting about him was that he he personifies Gormenghast itself. Dirty, old, unbending, unrelenting, like that's Gormenghast. Like
Well, he's
Barkentine in
the
many ways, yeah. Yeah,
Barkentine.
he's the master.
He's the ritual guy, right?
Yeah,
Master of
yeah.
rituals. Yeah. So
He
everything is about ritual, like
mhm.
at Gormenghast. So
And I thought it was really interesting because when him and Steerpike were facing off, when Steerpike tries to assassinate him, it goes wrong.
yeah,
There's like a portion of the book where like he was like Steerpike acknowledged that he wasn't just facing Barkentine, he was facing Gormenghast itself.
right.
So like Gormenghast was sort of like personified through Barkentine, and it was also an interesting flip of that was that scene where Steerpike was facing against Titus when Titus was a boy and like he was standing on the desk and they were like staring down at one another. Titus, because at that point Steerpike is now the new master of rituals, and
Yep.
Titus views Steerpike now as the personification of Gormenghast, of
Yep.
all the rituals and rules that he must abide by. So I really like how that facing off against Gormenghast is sort of flipped. And in many respects, I'd say that Steerpike and Titus are similar in the sense they do want to rebel against the institution of Gormenghast. However, Titus wants freedom. He wants freedom from it all. Steerpike is willing to use Gormenghast, its rituals, its laws, for his own purpose, for his own gain. I thought
Yeah.
that was very interesting.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Like Steerpike wants control.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had a thought and it totally left my brain. Oh gosh. Yeah, it totally left my brain. It was there and then I went, went left. Totally was gone. But yeah, so it's. I mean, we talked a little bit about Irma. Well, we talked more
Irma's,
about
yeah,
Belgrove.
Irma's part was just, it was just
Her,
hilarious. It was just funny.
her basically having like inviting all of the professors to be like, I want to get
Yeah,
married.
yeah, like telling your brother, like, it needs to happen. We're making a party. We're gonna do it. And
It's so funny.
she says it like she wants to be alone with the males. It's like she used that word, males. It's like, dang,
It's very,
Irma.
very clinical. Like
Mm-hmm.
again,
Yes.
to your point about like Gormenghast, like as an institution, like Irma is also shaped by Gormenghast, and like she has no interactions with anyone other than her brother.
Yeah. She's
So
very
she has this very
isolated.
yeah, exactly. So she has this like very clinical, like almost medical view of, or not even medical, but like this natural view, as in like nature of like, you know, uh, view of relationships. So it's like, oh, I want to get married, and it's very clinical the way she goes about it. It's not about like, oh, I want to, establish a relationship or a friendship with someone and have emotional connection. It's just like, all right, get
Yeah.
everybody in, get everybody with wine, and I will be the belle of the
The
ball. And
hostess. Yeah.
yeah, and
There will
Belgrove,
be no women.
yeah, there will be no other women. And Belgrove literally falling in love with her, like them falling in love with each other at first sight. So funny.
It's like
So
they
funny.
convince they convince themselves that they love the other. Like they talk themselves into, yes, I
Yeah.
love this one. I love this person. It's a, I don't know. It was just amusing, that whole part. Oh my god, the water bottle she puts in her
Oh,
chest,
in
so
her
she gets like
chest.
a, in a dress, yeah, to get a bosom. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
so
Oh
many
my
jokes.
god. And then
It
her having
was,
to leave the room. Oh
oh my god, yeah,
god.
because she's too overwhelmed, so she just dips out, and
And
then just
and the water bottle like it starts like deflating or something. I think. What was that? I
yeah,
think that was it.
it
It's
was getting
just so
cold or
funny.
something. Yeah,
Something like that. It's so weird, but so good. Ugh.
I did like towards the end of the book, we do get like one of the last scenes with Irma and Belgrove, because a bit before that they were obviously bickering and arguing because these are two different people and everything. They have different personalities and stuff like that. They do clash, but
Mhm.
at that moment where it's the flood, everything's uncertain. Like Irma's distressed. I really like that scene where like Belgrove just he doesn't like he just decides to sit down, put his arm around her, and then just offer her comfort.
That was
And
very sweet.
yeah, that was sweet. That was sweet. I like that. A little nice bit of conclusion over there.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. So you didn't make it past the first episode of BBC Gormenghast, huh?
I didn't make it past the first 5 minutes. I'm just like, I started watching it, and my husband was like, he doesn't know the context, obviously, of the books, and he's like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's the series I've been reading. And we start watching it, and he's like, what is this, a kids show? What is it, made for kids? And I was like, it definitely looks like it. Like, it's just,
uh,
what is.
yeah, the sets. I mean, I do like the practical sets and everything. It really doesn't suit the vibe, I would
It
say.
does
It
not
doesn't.
at all.
Because whenever I think of Gormenghast, I think gothic. I think
Yeah.
straight up gothic, and then it's a bright, like I mentioned it one time. I think in the last discussion, it reminded me a bit of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
The costumes and some of the sets, but yeah, I think it's hard. In all honesty, I think it is a bit hard to adapt uh, the Gormenghast trilogy. in all honesty, I think it's gonna be a bit tough.
Yeah.
I did mention in a story. I don't know if you saw it. You saw Corpse Bride, right? Have you seen the film Corpse
Uh,
Bride by Tim Burton?
I've not seen it, but I know of it. Like it's, a la not Nightmare on Elm Street. That's not the right word.
Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. But yeah, I do feel that if you're going to adapt Gormenghast, I feel like stop motion would be good in the style of, I don't know, something like Corpse Bride, because I think Corpse Bride really got like the dark gothic mood, and because it's stop motion and you're dealing with puppets, you can have that exaggerated looks to the characters. Here's the thing with the BBC Gormenghast, it's going to be hard when you're casting, because like the characters have such distinct features to them,
Yeah.
like almost caricature like, that it's going to be kind of hard to imitate it as a real human being, as an actor, without it feeling hokey or corny in a way.
And also, more than the characters, I feel like even just like that one scene where the headmaster dies, like that is so it's morbidly whimsical way to die. Like you can't it's going to be really hard to make that believable in a live action
Yeah, like there's,
adaptation.
I feel that the source material, I think it's just one of the instances where the source material is just a bit hard to adapt, because you're dealing with not only the atmosphere but the tone, the looks of the characters. It's all very distinct. Yeah, it's going to be a tough thing to do. So, I mean, they tried.
It's true.
They
What
tried.
we need,
So yeah.
What we need is Peter Jackson to fall in love with the Gormenghast series and adapt it, because he was good at adapting Lord of the Rings.
I mean, Christopher Lee was at that BBC Gormenghast. We could have had it.
I forgot about that.
He was Mr. Flay. He was Mr. Flay.
Oh,
also,
gosh.
Another thing, I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna push myself to watch the BBC Gormenghast. I'm telling you right now, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, like, he is distractingly attractive to be Steer Pike.
Yeah.
It's he definitely does that. It's so different. It's, yes.
Well, back to the book though. What do you think? So I was gonna ask, like, what do you think would happen in the next book? But I mean, and you can still answer that, by the way, but I stopped myself because I remembered that, so Mervyn Peake was going through, like, his mental capacities were heavily impaired as he was going through dementia while he was writing Titus Alone. So from everything that I've heard, it is like the least. I mean, it is the shortest by far. It's less than half of the size of Gormenghast. And from everything that I've heard, it is not, I don't want to say not a fulfilling ending, but it is, you can tell that there are inconsistencies. But with that said, do you have any hopes or any anticipations for
honestly, I'll take anything. I mean, they killed off Steer Pike. They killed off Fuchsia. I'm like, give me anything, Peake. Just give, because we've left Gormenghast. We've left the cast that became so attached to. So, in all honesty, I don't really have much expectations going into Titus Alone, because this is kind of new territory. I mean, he's escaped. Right? Yeah, he's escaped the boundaries of his home. He's like, off to a new world. So Yeah,
Maybe
be
he
very,
will
very
become the new thing.
maybe. I kind of hope he doesn't come back, because when he was leaving, his mother said that there you'll tread a circle, you'll keep
Yeah,
walking, and end up in Gormenghast. I'm like, nah, don't listen to her, Titus. Keep walking, like find something else other than Gormenghast.
that is another thing that I marked is there's nowhere else, it said. And it being so Titus says, I'm leaving Gormenghast. I cannot explain. I do not want to talk. I came to tell you, and that is all. Goodbye, mother. He turned and walked quickly to the door. He longed with his whole soul to be able to pass through and into the night without another word being spoken. He knew she was unable to grasp so terrible a confession of perfidy. Perfidy. Whatever. And
Perfidy,
out of
yeah.
this and out of the silence that hung at his shoulder blades, he heard her voice. It was not loud, it was not hurried. There is nowhere else, it said. You will only tread a circle, Titus groaned. There's not a road, not a track, but it will lead you home, for everything comes to Gormenghast.
You see, I
That
heard that, and I heard a challenge.
so
I heard a challenge.
yeah, that was just so weighty. I mean, what we've talked about with the Countess, like, yes, she has like kind of devolved back to where she was before, but in that moment, like, you can see the glimpse of her without the cats and the birds and stuff like that. Like, everything is about Gormenghast, and to in her own way, the Countess has also been kind of devoted to Gormenghast as an
Oh
ideal,
yeah.
and
Oh yeah. Exactly.
so
Like, I think that's why I don't know. That's why I root for a bit, like Steer Pike and Titus, because in a way they are rebels.
yeah,
They
to
rebel,
find
and they don't. Yeah, they rebel against the institution, against this massive, all-consuming institution. And I think that's what makes them so, at least, compelling to me. And even
right.
Fuchsia also, like, she desired, to break free. And
Right.
I just feel that it's just so compelling.
And
Honestly, that
I'm honestly nervous because so far, everyone that's tried to break free and rebel hasn't turned out so well. So
it'll be. He just doesn't have to go home. Just prove her
true,
wrong.
true.
Just stay away. Find somewhere that isn't. Honestly, it's honestly terrifying what you said. She said, like, you'll just tread a circle and you just come back. Like, that's honestly terrifying
Yeah,
to me. Like you're in a limbo, and it's just
yeah,
Gormenghast forever. And if that's the case, like, no wonder Steerpike desired to take control over everything, because if there's nothing beyond Gormenghast, well, might as well just take over the whole thing.
right. And maybe change it. So
Yeah.
even though it's change it not necessarily for, well, change it in his way for in very
In his
selfish.
image.
Yes. Yeah. Steerpike's image. I'm just imagining that.
His big forehead image.
Oh god, yeah.
I'll never let that go.
All right,
Honestly,
so
yeah.
oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, that last portion of the book, all the way from when he's trying to hide out in his cave, all the way to, like, his death, was just so thrilling.
Oh.
Absolutely thrilling. I loved it.
Oh god, yeah, them going through like him hiding above the doorwell
The ledge, yeah,
in the
the
room.
ledge of the window, yeah.
Yeah, and then Titus and the Countess like finally getting along enough to have this idea of like sawing through the ceiling, and oh god, it's all just so cool.
It was so good. Like, he's on that ledge, the volunteer comes in, she pounces on him, kills him, takes his stuff, and tries to pose as the volunteer. And then when he's caught, he like swims out, nearly drowns, but ends up, in the ivy. It's like he can't. He's like an animal. He's just a
And
pure
Titus going into
animal.
the ivy, that was just so good.
Yeah, loved it.
But, all right, so we have Titus alone left. Well, technically, I don't know. Did you get a copy of Titus Awakes?
I still need to get my copy, but hopefully
Okay.
I can get soon.
Okay.
Yeah, because Titus alone will not take long.
Yeah. So we have that on the docket. So anyone that's watching this and has read Titus alone, look forward to that. Hopefully in the very near future. But thank you, Marianne. This was always so much fun. I'm so glad I have someone to talk about this series with.
Yeah, there's no one I know who I can talk about, Gormenghast with, honestly. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for dealing with that's so good. But yeah, so again, everyone, I will leave Marianne's information down below. And please be on the lookout for the video discussion that we will do for Titus Alone in the coming weeks, hopefully.